Well, I'd love to start
Yeah.
exactly there.
Okay.
I know a lot of people watching will have some curiosity around this because I think it's just kind of a cultural stuckness that we have, especially in Western culture, that the way that you work and the things that you like to talk about start with the difference between touch and sex. And for so
Yeah.
many people, the only way they experience touch is through sex. And so it can be really easy to kind of combine or confuse the two. And I would really love it if you could talk about the difference between touch and sex and kind of what they mean to you.
Sure. Well, you're right. There's a difference, and the difference is really important. We are wired to touch and to be touched. You know the stories of infants who didn't get touched at birth and can just waste away, basically. So, as human beings, we need touch, and we never outgrow that need. And I think of it as in a couple of layers. One is just that we need stimulus to our nervous system, and touch is one of the ways we do that. So that's one part of it. But the other part of it is that touch is one of the ways that we communicate and connect with other human beings. And so there's another layer of touch besides just the tactile data that's coming in your skin. And we never outgrow it. And um, and it has that need has nothing to do with sex. It has nothing to do with sex. It's a human need, just like air and water and connection with other human beings. But in our society, we get those two really mixed up. And unfortunately, once they've gotten conflated and confused, it tends to spiral out, getting worse, because if you think that all touch is about sex, then when there is any touch, then you then you try to turn it into sex, and so you don't touch unless you are wanting sex or in a sexual situation, and then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If they are conflated for you, which they are for most people, what it takes to separate them is having an experience about touch that isn't about sex. And until you have that, you can't deconflate them because you haven't experienced either of them on their own. So cuddle parties is one way to do that, of course, and experimenting with your friends is another way to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, really important.
It is really important.
Mm-hmm.
And, when I think about touch, I was talking to TT Baum a little bit about this in our chat.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking about how often people don't feel like touch counts from professionals. So, like, when you go to get a massage, we often don't feel like that counts as being touched because for so many of us, touch needs to be in a very specific setting, right?
Right, right.
And also how often in our culture touch tends to be very gendered in that it's
Mm-hmm.
acceptable for certain types of bodies to have a little bit more
Right,
touch that's
right,
very platonic, and other types of
right,
bodies that's very threatening and unacceptable.
right, right. Which is just bullshit.
Yes.
I mean, it's true. That's what happens, and that's what happens in our society. But the idea that these kind of people need touch and these type of people don't need touch, that's bullshit.
Absolutely. So you've talked about how a lot of your work is around helping people figure out what their wants are. And then
Mm-hmm.
I think the critical piece that you also added was, and how to trust that, which is something that
Yeah,
I personally struggle with. Like,
yeah,
how do I trust that?
yeah.
And so what are some things that we can do if we're a little unsure about our wants or we're not sure how to trust them to get started?
That's a great question. Most of my most of my work is built on a practice that I teach people, and it's called the 3 minute game. And you mentioned it. It's those two questions of how do you want to touch me, and how do you want me to touch you. And the 3 minute game just means you take turns asking each other those questions. Super simple. That's all it is. And that's on my website. It's on YouTube. But the reason I call it a practice is not because you practice it so that you get better. but a practice, meaning it's something that I come back to again and again because it teaches me something about myself and it gives me experiences that I would not have otherwise. And so when you take something like this and you practice it, and obviously it requires another person or two or more, but anyway, we'll just talk about two. When you practice it with another person, what you find is that there's no escape for you. Your partner says, "How would you like me to touch you for 3 minutes?" There's no way to skip over the fact that it's your turn. And what you learn there is that, oh shit, it's embarrassing. I don't know what it is. Oh, what am I going to do? I'm ashamed. I'm too selfish. Something's wrong with me. Blah, 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 blah. All that stuff will come up. But it's okay. It just comes up, and it's there for all of us. I mean, we all have that stuff in there.
Yeah.
But when your partner is there holding space for you and just being with you and being patient with you and staying there, you find that after a while, you notice what you want. Yeah. And it might take 20, 30 seconds. It might take a minute. It feels like forever because it's awkward. I've seen it take 20 minutes. I've seen it take 45 minutes one time with a client.
Yeah.
And that was a big aha for me. It was a big aha for her. But having someone be there with you and keep their loving attention on you while you fumble around and feel awkward is incredibly healing and also very bonding and liberating. So this practice, it can be challenging. It's also very fun because you think, oh, well, that's what I want, and you do it, and it's like, oh, that's fun. So it's very fun, and it's very challenging. There's, there's no point in hiding that. But when someone asks you, your partner asks you, "How would you like me to touch you for 3 minutes?" It's part of your turn. You get to sit there as long as you want to sit there. And people will say, and practitioners often ask me this too, well, what if they don't know what they want? Why is that a problem? That is not a problem. Yeah. Why are you making it a problem? It's only a problem if you're in a hurry to get going.
I love that.
If you are not in a hurry to get going, it is not a problem. The other sort of turnaround for this is that having someone ask you what you want is a luxury. Yes. It's a luxury. And certainly not every situation in life do we have the opportunity to ask for what we want. So when we do, it's a luxury. And why do we feel it's not a luxury? Why do we feel that it's anything but that? Because we don't want to feel awkward.
Yes.
So just be kind to yourself. Nobody wants to feel awkward. And it is so worth it.
Yeah.
It's so worth it. Because then you start to notice, oh, what I want matters. And you start to notice that, oh gosh, well, I'd like to have my head scratched, but that's kind of weird. So I don't believe that. I don't trust that. So as you play with this over time, and you play with it many times, and you play with it hundreds of times over years, you begin to gradually trust that the messages coming from your body up to your language centers are accurate. Yeah. You begin to trust that, that impulse to have my head scratched, that actually feels really good. Or, gee, I want your hand just right here, maybe a very specific place, right here. And you have no idea why. You just know, I want a hand there. Mm-hmm. And then you discover, that's just what I needed. And so you begin to gradually trust those messages that are coming up. And you begin to value them. That, these count. This is important. I matter. Yeah. And you learn how to communicate them. And a lot of people teach some really great ways to communicate, particularly in sexual situations where you kind of make it into an art form, and that's awesome, and they're very fun. This practice takes it down to the simplest sort of mechanism at the core of our being, which is the ability to say, will you blah, blah, blah. Extremely simple. And for that reason, usually the most difficult. Mm-hmm. So, will you blah, blah, blah? Or for the other question, may I blah, blah, blah? Mm-hmm. And it's like when you get down to that simplest way and sort of put the oil in the rusted up gear that's in there, yeah. Then it begins to function, and then you can get creative in all kinds of ways. But first you need to get that gear right at the center of the mechanism functioning. And it's there. Your body knows what you want. We're just not used to listening to ourselves. And that's just a matter of playing with it, and it comes. Mm-hmm. And being patient with yourself. One of the ways that we play with this with practitioners is seeing what happens when, as an example, you'd be on the table and I'd ask you how you want to be touched, and I'd just wait. And I wait, and I wait, and I wait. And what people often say is, well, gosh, you have to be patient. No, you don't. Because patient means you want something different than what is happening. Mm. If what is happening is already wonderful, patience doesn't fit that situation. You don't need it. Yeah. And when I really understand that what's happening in you while you start to notice what you want and value it and trust it, there's a lot happening in there. But there's no need to go anywhere else. You're quite busy. Yeah. There's a lot happening in there. There's no need to get started because that's where all the juice is. Yeah. Yeah. So the short answer is, besides this sort of long answer of the practice, the short answer is to start with, when you're learning to ask for what you want, start with things that are very small, very simple, very tangible, short periods of time. Mm. Will you scratch my back? Will you hold my hand? May I play with your hair? It's much more challenging to ask for a big, convoluted, complex, big scene that you want to do. Yeah. And sometimes those are harder to even imagine what it is that you want for many people. So if you want to learn, start with something really small. Please pass the salt. Yeah. Will you bring me some tea? Start with really small, really tangible.